To the outside world, Kamikaze Chris was more than a fearless driver. He was a force to be reckoned with on the streets. His relentless will to win seemed unstoppable. Street racing isn't just about speed. It's a high-stakes gamble, where even the best can't outrun fate forever. Just when it seemed like Chris had cemented his legacy, disaster struck. In an instant, his world flipped upside down. So, what really happened? And where does he go from here? This is the heartbreaking story of Kamikaze Chris, and the tragedy that changed everything. Chris, the man behind that menacing flat black El Camino on Street Outlaws, isn't someone most would peg as a street racing legend. By all accounts, he wasn't supposed to make it. But time and time again, he shattered expectations. And here's the thing, it was never part of some grand plan. Life simply led him down this road, and he ran with it. Because for Chris, being the underdog is all he's ever known. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Oklahoma City, Chris didn't have much. In his own words, his family wasn't just struggling, they were flat out broke. Not the tight-on-money kind of broke, but the kind where hand-me-down clothes weren't just second-hand. They were threadbare, stained, and already past their prime. If Chris wanted anything beyond the bare necessities, it was on him to figure out. For him, there was only one thing worth chasing: racing, not cars. At least, not at first. Chris started with dirt bikes. Ask him why, and he'll tell you he's not necessarily a car guy. He's a racing guy. If it has wheels, he'll race it. A dirt bike, a shopping cart, probably even a lawnmower if you put one in front of him. By the time he was 3, he was already on a motorcycle. While most kids his age played at the park, Chris was working every odd job he could find just to keep his bike running. Twice a week, he lined up at the starting gate, racing against riders nearly twice his age. But that never fazed him. He had a hunger to win, a love for speed, and a work ethic that set him apart. That grit, he got it from his dad, a successful drag boat racer with one simple rule: you break it, you fix it. Chris took that to heart. He mowed lawns, chopped trees, and pumped gas. Anything to scrape together the cash for his next ride. Every upgrade, from his BMX bike to his first dirt bike, was earned. And once he got a taste of real competition, there was no turning back. But Chris wasn't just racing. He was helping others go faster too, especially when it came to cars. Back in high school, when Kamikaze first crossed paths with Justin Big Chief Shearer, it was like two puzzle pieces snapping into place. Both were fiercely competitive. Both lived and breathed cars. Neither one ever backed down from a challenge. In fact, it was Kamikaze who first gave Big Chief that now iconic nickname. But their bond wasn't just built on speed, it was forged in the late-night grind of the garage. Kamikaze wasn't just the guy talking fast and driving faster. He was the one out in the driveway, night after night, wrenching on Big Chief's 1972 Pontiac Le Mans Crow. To them, it wasn't just a car. It was the foundation of their friendship, a machine they built with their own hands, one late-night fix at a time. That hands-on experience set Kamikaze on his own path. First came a Chevy LUV with a small block, then a Blazer, also with a small block. Eventually, an A-body Chevelle. But that Chevelle, it was something else. A 71, painted a loud emerald green that looked like it belonged on a bass boat. It wasn't pretty, but it had attitude. And it was fast, running 9s, tearing up the streets. A rowdy, no-nonsense piece of machinery. But cars come and go, and the game never stops. Kamikaze stayed tight with a core group of OKC racers who weren't just out there to cruise, they were out to dominate. Plenty of guys showed up just to be part of the scene, to hang out and show off their rides. But for Kamikaze, Big Chief, Dave Comstock, and the rest of their crew, racing wasn't a hobby, it was a mission. That dedication showed every time Kamikaze hit the road. If muscling the car down the street was what it took to win, that's exactly what he did. He wasn't reckless, he was calculated, but he pushed harder than most, always riding that razor-thin line between control and chaos. That's how the nickname Kamikaze was born. He had a way of making even the wildest situations look effortless. To him, Driving was pure instinct. While others needed a drink to unwind or distractions to escape, Kamikaze found his peace at full throttle. Inches from disaster, that's where he thrived. The rush, the edge, the sheer adrenaline of pushing both himself and his car to the absolute limit. That was what made him feel alive. It didn't take long for that fearless attitude to get Kamikaze Chris noticed. When he joined Big Chief on Street Outlaws in its third season, he brought that raw, no-holds-barred energy straight to the screen. The show helped bring drag racing into the mainstream, and soon enough, Kamikaze Chris became one of the most talked-about racers in the country. And with that rise, he became the proud owner of what might just be the most infamous El Camino in the game. But before Chris got his hands on it, the car belonged to his childhood friend, Tyler Flip Pretty. They called it the Slut, a Frankenstein build, pieced together with every leftover part from their friends' cars whenever they upgraded. But don't let the name fool you. That car earned its reputation. When Flip rolled up in the first season of Street Outlaws, the Slut turned heads and dropped jaws. It was loud, obnoxious, and borderline ridiculous. Zoomy headers shot nitrous fireballs straight out of the fenders, and the rumors surrounding how it held together only fueled its legend. People swore it was patched up with silicone, JB Weld, duct tape, and enough Bondo to fill a swimming pool. And when Flip pulled up to collect his winnings, it made the sting for his opponents hurt just a little more. The Slut might have been a mess, but it was fast. And when Flip tragically passed away, his longtime friend Big Chief knew there was only one person who should have that car: Chris. No second guessing, no hesitation. For over a year, the El Camino sat under a tarp, gathering dust, waiting for the right hands to bring it back to life. And when Chris finally turned the key, it didn't just start, it roared, like it had been waiting for him all along. But a car like that wasn't going to come out of retirement quietly. Its first real drive, one of the rear brakes locked up and caught fire. And that was just the beginning. Soon, Chris broke it so badly it needed a full rebuild. That's when he struck a deal to drop in a friend's already built 5.8 engine. But the decision didn't sit right. Chris had always built his own engines. Taking someone else's work felt wrong. And it turns out, his instincts were right. 582 turned into a nightmare. 13 rebuilds in a single season. It felt like running a funny car team. Race, rebuild, blow it up, rebuild, rinse and repeat. It was the kind of grind that would break most racers. But when you're chasing speed, that's the price you pay. Eventually, Chris had enough. The constant failures weren't cutting it, so he made the call. Digging into his savings, he teamed up with Graham Jones at Fast Times Motor Works to build something serious, an all-aluminum 632 with 4 stages of nitrous. And that wasn't all. He and his buddy Les took on a back half chassis conversion right in the garage. The mission? Get back on OKC's top 10 list. By the summer of 2017, Kamikaze was back in the mix, winning races and making his presence known. But something still wasn't right. Despite the wins, the car didn't run the way Chris wanted, and settling? That was never an option. Under the hood, the drivetrain was a cocktail of fresh and seasoned parts, all built for one purpose: raw speed. Kincaid Racing Engines in Arizona handled the build, relying on Wiseco for the rotating assembly, with Crower and Pack covering the valve train. They switched to electronic fuel injection, using components from fuel injector development and a Haltech EFI system calling the shots. And when 4 stages of nitrous weren't enough, they upgraded to 6. Because why not? But all that power meant nothing without traction. The stock front-end design was holding the El Camino back, so Autofab Race Cars in Maryland crafted a new chromoly tube front end, and Chris and Les handled the install. They even ditched the radiator to shave weight, relying instead on ice water pumped from a tank in the back. The suspension was dialed in with precision. QA1 adjustable coilovers and PAC springs kept the balance of control and aggression. Power flowed through a bulletproof Power Glide transmission into a Moser 9-inch rear end. The original four-link setup remained intact, but it had never felt sharper. Still, even with all the upgrades, the El Camino hadn't lost its G-body soul. It was unpredictable, unruly, just the way Chris liked it. Yet, for all the power under the hood, there were limits no amount of tuning could fix. The El Camino's stock 117-inch wheelbase was far from ideal for a race car. The drive shaft alone measured 62.5 inches, a massive stretch compared to most racers' rides. And with the cab placement closer to a truck than a traditional muscle car, the weight distribution challenges were unavoidable. It rolled on 29.5 by 10.5 Hoosier slicks, doing its best to grip the asphalt. Every pass was an unpredictable ride, and for Chris, that was half the fun. As long as he wasn't on fire, he was good. Because for Kamikaze Chris, racing isn't just a weekend thrill. It's a way of life. Every bolt, every dent, every late night in the garage tells a story of sacrifice. That El Camino isn't just a machine. It's built from busted knuckles, sleepless nights, and every spare dollar he could find. Sometimes even the ones he couldn't. By day, he runs a small heating and air conditioning business, but by night, long after the world has gone quiet, he's in the garage, cleaning the Lexan windows, checking spark plugs, dialing in the tires, double-checking the brakes. He doesn't have the luxury of throwing money at problems, so instead, he makes sure nothing is left to chance. And for Kamikaze Chris, that's exactly the way it should be. Guys like Kamikaze Chris, working class, self-funded, running a car built in a home garage, aren't supposed to go wheel to wheel with the big names. And yet, he does. Time and time again, the cost of racing has pushed him to the edge. He's been dead broke while competing on Street Outlaws, but that underdog label? That's not some marketing gimmick. It's just reality. Chris will tell you himself. He's stubborn, he's proud. That's exactly what it takes to build, race, and win with an El Camino. But even the toughest racers don't do it alone. Behind Chris is a team of friends and sponsors, like Haltech, Speedmaster, and Wolf Aircraft Products, keeping him in the fight. Still, at its core, the El Camino is proof of what passion, pride, and relentless determination can achieve when money alone isn't enough. And if you think a car like his is out of reach, Kamikaze Chris would tell you otherwise. Anyone willing to sacrifice their time, money, and heart could build something like it. But here's the difference. Most people hesitate before diving into something this intense. Chris never did. For him, it's all or nothing. Always has been. He spent years trying to resist that part of himself, but now he's embraced it. There's no halfway. He'll either make it big or crash and burn trying. And if you know anything about racing, you know that's exactly the mindset it takes to win. But little did he know, the same car that brought him so much success was about to lead him straight into disaster. You see, street racing has never been the safest pursuit. For those who live for speed, it's as exhilarating as it is unforgiving. Street Outlaws fans know that rush, the raw power of high-performance machines, the tension at the starting line, the split-second decisions that can mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. Crashes are part of the sport, but no matter how often they happen, it's always shocking how quickly a finely tuned race car can transform into a twisted wreck. And few know that better than Kamikaze Chris. Back in July 2020, while filming Street Outlaws, he learned just how brutal street racing can be. It wasn't just a minor scrape or a dented bumper. His El Camino was done, totaled. The body, the chassis, the engine, even the turbochargers. Nearly everything was destroyed. Only a handful of parts, like the parachute lever, shifter, and rear housing, were salvageable. Chris later shared the story on his YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life. That day, the Elco had already been acting up. A faulty drive shaft sensor had him second-guessing. He wasn't feeling great about the race, but when another driver threw out a challenge, Chris couldn't say no. And one race later, the El Camino was nothing but twisted metal. Losing that car wasn't just about the money, or the countless hours he'd poured into it. That Elko was his car, the one he loved most, one that carried years of memories. Seeing it destroyed was a gut punch, the end of an era. But if there's one thing about Kamikaze Chris, it's that he doesn't back down. The crash wasn't the end. It was just another test. And like any true racer, he was ready to face it head-on. For his comeback, Chris did something wild. He listed a set of wrecked parts from the El Camino on eBay. Not just any parts, though. These were the Weld racing wheel, Mickey Thompson tire, and TBM brake rotor ripped off the passenger side when the car flew off the road, right in front of Discovery Channel's cameras. To top it off, Chris signed them. The auction blew up. 8 days still remaining. The bids had soared past $10,600. But then, in classic Kamikaze fashion, he upped the stakes. If the auction hit $25,000, Chris vowed to personally cook and serve the winner a steak dinner, live on Facebook, all while wearing his race suit. Fans went wild, embracing the challenge. These weren't just wrecked car parts, they were pieces of racing history. And to Street Outlaws fans, that meant something. Orders poured in, with over 100 in just a week. Every dollar from the auction went straight into Chris's next build, a C5 Corvette designed for pure speed. And when the Corvette rolled out of the garage, it was clear that the spirit of the El Camino was alive and well. Sleek and aggressive, with its glossy black paint and fierce stance, it felt like a reincarnation. The rebuild was personal. From the wreckage, Chris salvaged the engine, transmission, and drivetrain, meticulously reworking each part before transplanting them into the Corvette. The Elko may have been lost, but thanks to Chris, its legacy raced on. But Kamikaze, Chris didn't just stop with racing. His TV fame became a launch pad for something bigger. He built Kamikaze Motorsports, an online store packed with merch and die-cast models of his iconic El Camino. Then there's his YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life, where fans get a behind-the-scenes look at his wild road adventures and everyday life. Since its launch in 2020, the channel has gained over 70,000 subscribers, and counting. Still, even with all the side hustles, racing remains his first love. That's why fans were stunned when he suddenly vanished from Street Outlaws. No grand farewell, no explanation, just gone. Naturally, the rumors started flying. Had he been fired? Did he quit? Was he done with racing? In July 2023, Chris finally broke his silence on Facebook, confirming he wouldn't be in the 6th season of No Prep Kings. But beyond that, he left fans with more questions than answers, and the speculation only grew. But here's what we know for sure. Kamikaze Chris hasn't stepped away from racing, not even close. He's still dominating the streets of Oklahoma and tearing it up at No Prep events across the country. These days, his focus is all on that beast of a Corvette, a car that proves he has no plans of slowing down. Fans have followed him through the highs and lows, and through it all, one thing remains constant: his refusal to back down from a challenge. On screen or off, Kamikaze Chris is far from finished. And if history tells us anything, the road ahead is bound to be one hell of a ride.